Welcome to Creative or Dead, a podcast about living a creative life.
We're your hosts, Alicia Callahan
And David Constantine.
Come with us as we interview all sorts of people about their creative practice.
Hey, Alicia. So we've just had a conversation with Richard Walzer, who is the design director of Breakthrough Innovation, bracket, Europe, close bracket, at PepsiCo. He's worked with some of the world's most well-known consumer brands. He's worked with Mars, and he's consulted to Procter & Gamble and a number of other world-leading brands. We actually worked together a long time ago in consulting and innovation as well. He had lots to say about the creative process and lots to kind of unpack for our audiences, I think, about creativity within big organizations. But what stood out to you, Alicia?
I think the thing that is really fascinating is the way that Richard speaks about innovation. Like, innovation is a topic that, gets thrown around all the time, but what actually is it? And hearing someone working at this level and doing actual innovation, it really highlights the value of design, that the design thinking that comes into play in order to innovate. And so I think, it proves the fact that design is a valuable asset, even when it may not be a design first idea on the surface.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for those listening in disciplines outside of the corporate world, I suggest take note at the amount of effort that goes into simply asking, is this a problem worth solving, before they then go about the best way to solve it. And so often in all spheres, Richard talks about in his world as well, but I think we all see it in the creative environments that we work in, so often beautifully rendered, very compelling creative outcomes or design outcomes are rendered useless because not enough interrogation happened at the start to go, great, we're really glad you can solve that problem, but is it worth solving? Is it a problem that exists? And can it scale? So to kind of plug that commercial dimension in is, I know it's a conversation we've not had as much on this podcast before, but I think it's a really interesting thing for people of all creative disciplines to think about.
Absolutely. So hope you enjoy.
Welcome to Creative or Dead, Richard Walzer.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we normally start our process just with getting you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Why are we talking to you? And what's your creative practice right now?
Thanks, David. So, as you said, I'm Richard Walzer. I'm based in London in the United Kingdom. I currently work for PepsiCo as the Design Innovation Director in Europe. Prior to this, though, we worked together coming up to 20 years ago on the agency side.
You've got more grays than me.
I think I did say that. I definitely have more grays than you. Let's not count them. But no, we worked together agency side in the design industry for a few years together. From there, I worked at Mars Wrigley, designing confectionery. And so I've switched the sugar snacks for the salty snacks over the last few years.
And in your world, I mean, innovation as a term gets bandied around a lot, as we well know with the record you just mentioned. For you, what does innovation look like in the kind of organizations that you've been working in most recently? What does an innovation lead do?
That's a great question. I think there's a primary difference between what people around me call innovation versus what I believe innovation is. Innovation for a lot of people, especially in the CPG industry, which I'm in, is just new stuff. Anything new is innovation for many of my colleagues. So if we launch a new flavor, that would be regarded as this year's innovation. For me, that's not real innovation. For me, innovation is doing something to grow the business. What's truly going to move the needle, i.e. how are we going to attract new cohorts, drive into new occasions, and deliver something distinctively different that is going to change what we do. So if I describe to you what I describe to a lot of colleagues in terms of when to work with me and my team is the known knowns or the unknowns unknowns. So if you're in the known space, i.e.
Once again, but slower.
If you're
the
in the
known knowns
known,
are the unknowns knowns.
that's the ones that can't. It sounds like gnomes when you say it like that. The known knowns, you know what you want and you know how to make it. I.e., the flavor example, we know how to make flavors, and the route to market is the same as it's always been. The value that me and my team are going to bring to that conversation is pretty limited. I would do myself out of a job by saying that, but fundamentally, that's not where the value is. The value is in the unknowns. If you don't know what the problem is to solve, you don't know what the challenge is, you don't know how to make it, you don't know how to go to market with it, that's the ambiguous space that design innovation can really aid you.
At the risk of getting into semantics too early, is it the difference between divergence and differentiation?
Oh, wow. You're into one of my favorite topics. I don't necessarily use divergence. I tend to use the word distinctiveness more than diversion or differentiation. Differentiation is one of those kind of early terms you get taught in your career and you realize it's not the most useful. Being different for different sake is not all that important. Especially difference can generally be copied. Distinctiveness, on the other hand, is ownable. And it's how do you drive yourself into a really distinctive space and then own that.
Amazing.
The job title, design innovation, in itself is quite a ambiguous sort of title. And as you're sort of explaining it, it's starting to make more sense. But what did you actually study? Did you ever think this would be the path you would go down?
Well, firstly, I mean, you've just hit the nail on the head. We're putting two words together that no one understands, either one of them. Try to explain the word design to people or try to explain the word innovation to people is nigh on impossible. So you glue them together and I'm really in a job where no one has a clue what I do. So
you're in a distinctive job.
I'm in a niche distinctive job that is difficult to explain to people, including people that work directly with me. On that note, I think generally, no, it's quite funny, but I think people don't genuinely know what we do until they work with us and they spend a few months with us and they go, oh, now I understand what you guys do. What did I do? No, I certainly didn't imagine that I'd be designing snacks for a living. I did study design, so product design at university.
Okay.
I started out, actually, I can't remember, David, were you there at the time? We were designing things for Dell. And
yeah, just at the tail end of it, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the kind of thing that I thought I'd be leaving university to do, because that was the peak of industrial design. Apple would just, the second coming of Apple was happening then. So that was kind of the dream kind of world. I was going to be designing tech and all of the industrial design stuff. Not for a second did I imagine that people designed food. That was not something that was brought up in university. And so when Mars approached me and said, would you like to come in-house and join us? My instant answer was no. And we had a few conversations. It was like, actually, this would be pretty cool. And plus, I'd be working in a chocolate factory. So very cool.
They didn't tell you at that point that they make more pet food than they do chocolate.
I didn't work in the pet food business.
Right.
That's something I learned. I learned soon after I got there that yes, the majority of Mars's business is actually in pet food. We can go down a rabbit hole on that one if you want.
Literally? Is that when they get? Is that their supply chain?
Don't record me on that one.
But I guess you were saying when Mars came, it was a big leap. But I do recall. One of the first conversations you and I had post-Dell was I saw you tapping away at a presentation on a screen and said, what are you doing, Richard? And you said, I'm defining the future of shaving. Not practically in the mirror in the bathrooms, but that kind of work, it seems as though it was apparent at that point that the design of the object was being pushed further and further kind of downstream. And the opportunity that we were working in a lot was actually defining the next market, defining the future state, as you were saying, in our pre-record conversation, you're designing, you're working on things now that don't exist and won't exist for some time. So you must have started to get a bit of a flavor of that still when you're in your consulting vehicle as to what the opportunity might be in defining spaces, platforms, markets, products, whatever that might be.
I think 100%. I think what we worked on together has translated directly through to what I do now. In that, I think when we work together, I define myself as a design strategist. I think I still define myself in that space. I don't, to be clear, whilst we discussed, I did industrial design at school. I'm not a great designer. You are better than me in that space. There's loads of people that are aesthetically better designers than I am. What I realized that my specialism is I'm good at strategic thinking, what people like to call design thinking. I'm good at solving complex challenges and identifying the right way forward. So what people don't seem to realize is that there isn't really an Edison light bulb kind of moment in innovation. There's it does happen to some people that have an idea and they execute it brilliantly, but that's quite rare. The majority of it is rigor and hard work to identify what the right solution should be, identifying the real human job to be done, and defining solutions off the back of that. And so I don't know how familiar you are with the double diamond process, but in the double diamond process, too many people jump to the second diamond solution. People have an idea, let's define what the solution is, and let's launch it. And I see this time and time again, that the first diamond, identifying what the real opportunity or the real challenge is, gets ignored. And so as a result of that, the first diamond, which is about designing the right things, doesn't happen. And therefore, the second one, which is meant to be about designing things right, isn't actually about designing things right. It's about designing the wrong things right. And that is why innovation tends to fail time and time again, because you spent too much time developing the wrong solutions. I mean, I always point to and joke about with like Dragon's Den. I don't know what version of that you have in Australia.
I think they call it Shark Tank or something. It's like the American one, yeah.
Yeah, Shark Tank. But if you watch that, it's hilarious because these people have spent, well, not hilarious, but they spent their life savings developing something.
In a Schadenfreude sense.
Yeah, exactly. But they spent time developing something absolutely ridiculous, and they get laughed at by the dragons going, stop it. Stop spending your time and money on this thing.
Making underwater socks. Yeah.
Exactly. Whatever. I've not seen that episode, but whatever it may be, it's critical that you spend the time up front developing what the right solution would be. Now, I always get the quote wrong from Einstein, but he said something along the lines of, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'll spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. And fundamentally, I align to Einstein. I'm obviously not as clever as he was, hence why I quote him rather than people are out there quoting me. But fundamentally, I think that's where innovation comes from. It's in the rigor of insight.
So then how do you apply some of this design thinking in your current job? And I guess, the double diamond is sort of like one theory, but are there other, what's that process like day to day?
Within a big corporation or a brand.
What's that like? So fundamentally, it's exactly that. It's trying to identify what the penetration barriers or opportunities are for our brands, our portfolio, or our business. So I spend time identifying what I think are going to be interesting spaces for us to explore, and then align those with my leadership team to say, I think our team, my cross-functional team, should spend some time exploring this challenge and then seeing where it'll go. And that typically leads us down a path of setting out hypotheses of what we think may happen. We do foresight. So we spend time trying to understand what's going to happen in the future. If you're familiar with foresight, there's possible and probable scenarios that happen. We try to go for probable. Many people like to use foresight and look 10, 15, 20 years out and come up with blue sky sci-fi thinking. The reality is what's going to affect the business is a 5-year horizon. So we spend time trying to identify what are the big shifts, so not trends. Again, that goes back to flavor change and things. What are the kind of the big shifts, the paradigm changes that are likely to happen in the next 5 years? And then once we've identified those, we try to go out and find what we call future consumers. So we try to identify people today who are living close to that future lifestyle tomorrow. There are people, on the extremities of today's society who are doing things that represent bits of that future world that we see. So we spend time with them. We do ethnographies. So we've set people up with like GoPros in their living rooms, hours of footage of watching people walk in and out of their kitchen, walk in and out of their lounge. And in my case, fundamentally trying to understand, what's going on with their snacking behaviors in a natural environment. And we do that because I don't know if you're familiar with the term, the say-do gap, but there's a say-do
self-reporting bias.
Yeah, there's what people say in research is not the reality of what they do. And so you can sit down in, what typically, around a room and have a conversation with a group of people, and they all tell you this is what they actually do. And yes, I love your idea. I will spend my hard-earned money on your great idea. The reality is that's not what they really do. People struggle to articulate what they really do, or there's group bias. So if you've got people in a room together, they're all kind of aligning and nodding to each other. So by actually setting up things like GoPros and footage, you can genuinely start to just observe and just understand. I know it sounds like a David Attenborough, but watch people in their natural habitat and start to identify real problems and challenges that people have. And then, so once we've identified those problems and challenges, to understand whether they're real or not, we create what we call sacrificial prototypes. So we develop prototypes that are sacrificial. They're not in the sense of what most people do, concepts. I want to validate my idea. I'm not here to validate my idea. I'm here to validate my hypotheses. So I'm going to give these prototypes, these people, ideally, again, in their real environment. We'll watch them, see how they use them, see what they do for them, have conversations with them about that. And then you truly start to understand whether what you thought was a challenge or an opportunity or a job to be done is real, and then what the true tensions are and what the true attributes required are. And then if there's a business opportunity there, then you can start to develop a real prototype and real concepts off the back of that.
Is that time horizon getting shorter, do you think, with the kind of speed of information, the rise of AI? Like 10 years ago, looking 5 years ahead seemed like ample, but now even 1 or 2 years in the future seem quite unpredictable. So does it feel like it's changing from a commercial perspective?
No, I would say business commerciality only ever looks like 12 months out and is super interested in the short term. So I'm always pushing the business beyond its comfortable boundaries of what it's looking for. In terms of your question around, is it more or less predictable to understand the future? No, I would say it's relatively predictable to understand what the big shifts will be. What's almost impossible to understand exactly how they perform. What exactly happens. I can confidently say this paradigm shift is happening. It will happen. We will be doing this behavior in the future. What it actually means for us as a business and who wins out is harder to predict. And that's where, being ready and set up with optionality for different scenarios is important. So, for example, what we're doing right now. So a couple of years ago, I was talking about the growth of the metaverse. That terminology has kind of gone to the wayside. It's become a little bit unpopular. However, I will stand here. I'm sitting here today. But I will stand here on this call and say, I believe the metaverse will happen. There's enough evidence of that future to understand that kind of Ready Player One world. Hopefully not as extreme and dystopian as that, but it will definitely happen. The addictive nature of digital worlds for humans has been proven time and time again for the last 20 years.
When you say metaverse, you don't mean the Meta company owned metaverse. You just mean the concept of like a digital world, right? Or do you specifically mean like the Facebook Meta owned version of the metaverse?
No, and I think that's exactly what you can't predict. Like I said before, you can't predict which player and exactly how it comes to life. What I can predict is that virtual reality, certainly augmented reality, is going to happen. If you've spent time using it, the Apple Vision Pro, you will know how amazing that world can be. It's just that device is hugely expensive and uncomfortable and heavy and all of those things. But once the technology becomes small, light, efficient, cheap, all of us will be using those kind of worlds. And then what that means for us, you can start to predict through prototyping, but you can't determine exactly which player and how that will come to light. So for me, we start to then understand, okay, that's going to lead to new kind of occasions, new kinds of ways of working. And we can see that already. What I was trying to get to is that this podcast, you and I chatting now over the internet, is something that wouldn't have happened a few years ago. Everything was done face to face. We used to travel for meetings. David, you and I know, we're working agency side. We used, a day's work was 1 hour meeting with a client. You spend the morning traveling to the client, you'd have 1 hour with the client and then travel back. That was a day's work. Now I do 8 of those in a day because of the technology.
Lucky you.
Well, no, there are some definite downsides to some of these new technologies. But my point being is that world would have meant we turn up at a client's office. They have got biscuits and cake and coffees for us. That is a scenario for a business like mine where there's an occasion designed around foods and drinks. That has deteriorated significantly. It doesn't really happen anymore. So so for me, I'm trying to think about what snacks are going to be wanted in this new world if we're all digitally communicating the majority of our time rather than spending time face to face. Same as if you watch sport together, is an entirely different experience to watching sport in virtual reality. I spent time, there were trials on the Meta device to watch sport as if you were sitting in a stadium. Now, it's an unbelievably great experience to pretend you're in the Cop End of Anfield whilst you're in your living room at home. It's a visceral 360 experience. It's better than watching on a flat screen. But I'm by myself in my own world, not with my friends. And even if my friends were virtually sitting next to me in this stadium, we're not really drinking beer together. How are we drinking beer together I'm not going to buy a round for them virtually. So how do all those things start to translate through?
Yeah. A lot of creatives we speak to are naturally observers of the world around them. Typically people watchers. Are you a people watcher? And is what you've just described in terms of particularly the strapping GoPros to people and getting to compile all the results, like the ultimate people watching exercise?
I think I referred to myself as David Attenborough 10 minutes ago. So maybe. But
I mean, not to mention Einstein before it, but we won't keep count.
So yeah, big names. So no, I think curiosity is the foundation upon creativity and innovation. Am I the most curious person? Probably not. No, I would say it's when you set up these frames of what the challenges we're trying to solve, that suddenly you start looking for it and seeing it everywhere. And that's the important thing, by establishing what is the frame we're trying to understand, what are the key hypotheses we have. Because when you've got those top of mind, you're looking for it everywhere. So I think during a project, we are very observant. We're suddenly, seeing what people are doing on the street. We are observing people around the office that we sit next to and starting to understand that. But it's difficult to be curious about everything and just go, again, that light bulb moment of oh, I saw this person on the tube train in this morning doing this. I'm suddenly going to go off and invent that. You can do that, but it's much, much easier when your brain is attuned to what challenge you're trying to solve and you're constantly on the lookout to try and solve that. And then, yes, I am super curious about those spaces. So I go very deep. I get very geeky. I read lots and lots of articles or books on things, listen to podcasts on the subject to try and really understand it. Because I think that's key to innovation. You've suddenly got to become an expert in a space. Now that was harder, when we worked together, David, because we were working with new clients and new categories constantly. So you're constantly having to upskill yourself in new spaces. Because I'm working in one space in salty snacks, I get to really go deep and really understand the snacking world. But the world around it is what's changing. The context is what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, you kind of just brushed past something there in your point around a perception of the eureka moment, or these kind of very romantic with a capital R time period views of the moment of inspiration. The kind of the retelling of Darwin as having had his Archimedes moment, yet having written it in his diary 18 months earlier about natural selection. And that proliferates through a lot of creative industries, and perhaps, in some instances is kind of seen as a bit of a charlatan kind of behavior to go, I've got the idea from sitting here and gazing into my navel. It feels like the scale at which you're working, the money that's behind it, the organization that's behind it, the supply chains that are behind it, you have to get the problem so right. Is there a particular way that creativity plays in that space? Is there a particular kind of creativity that, do you see it as a constraint, or do you see it as just an opportunity of a different way of using those skills?
I think creativity is critical. I just think that the idea of a light bulb moment is overly used. That idea that everyone's capable of coming up with an idea. Of course they are. Everyone has innate creativity. Yes, if you ever go to kindergarten, you mentioned before we went live, young people have a huge amount of creativity, which unfortunately gets educated out of them, which I think is something we need to address. And again, we could go down a rabbit hole talking about design and arts education. But for me, creativity is about creatively exploring the right questions. Coming up with questions is a creative exercise. Exploring those foresight scenarios is a creative exercise to imagine what may happen in the future. Understanding what the ideal prototypes are that we want to develop and put in front of people, that's a creative exercise. So all of these things are creative, but not in the sense that a lot of people generally think. So it's not until you get to kind of that second diamond in the solution phase where you're really tightening in on the development of something, is it that people really get into that's what creativity is. We're really now going deep on what this idea is, this concept is, and how to bring it to life.
So Richard, I think you've touched on something there really interesting, and I think something that translates across all creative disciplines, but feels like it's a particular product of working at the end of business that you're working at, the scale, but also further upstream. The amount that you've talked about the importance of understanding that you're solving the right problem before you then come to the response. That feels like something that a lot of other creative disciplines maybe don't necessarily have to have the rigor around. But it seems really important for you. It led into a thought for me about actually our semantic discussion earlier in the piece around distinctiveness versus divergence. And your response seemed to me to be very nicely conditioned by the nature of the world that you are working in so much as distinctiveness, I imagine, can accrue an equity on a balance sheet, or at least a valuation at the board table, whereas divergence means nothing unless it can be put to a purpose, or put to an income or a profit. Do you find that's an opportunity for you, being able to think creatively, but also interface that better with the kind of leadership structures of businesses?
I think that's critical. I think what uniquely my team bring to a business like PepsiCo is that link between kind of what people like to think of design, executional, aesthetic, design beautiful objects, and business success and growth. Is we are that bridge between those two entities. For me, we can get into, we discussed before, what does the word design or what does the word innovation mean? Innovation for me means commercial success, something that is actually launched into market and is doing well. That is very different to inventiveness. So I'm not an inventor. I don't tinker in a shed and come up with ideas and make things. And I think that's what I'm going to use. I keep using big names here on this call, but I would again associate someone like Steve Jobs. He talks about himself. He's not an inventor. He wasn't an inventor. He was an innovator. he could identify things that other people had invented and bring them together in a beautiful package that people really wanted. And I think similarly is that we are looking around at new behaviors, but also new technologies, and bringing those things together in a way that we think will delight our customers. That is invention for me. Commercial success is what I'm looking for. It's hard enough in this business to try and get things commercialized, try and get things through the front end, through the back end, and out the door on a shelf. That's fundamentally what I want to do, but actually I just don't want to get it to shelf. I want it to stay at shelf, what we call stickiness. I want it to be there in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. That would be commercial success for me. Whereas a lot of people focus on, let's launch something, let's get it out there, we've got this idea. And it's not so much about what happens after it. So again, going back to the idea about flavors, we could launch a flavor, but the odds are that flavor will be gone in 3 months, 12 months time, and we'll move on to the next rotational flavor. I'm here to try and launch the next big idea, the thing that's going to be worth $100 million to $1 billion in market as it grows.
Can you, so I'll be the practical police here. Could you tell us, I mean, obviously the work you're doing at the moment isn't in market yet, but maybe a project from your recent past with Mars that kind of gives a nuts and bolts example of what that would look like, an opportunity that you spotted, a product that you brought to market, and what that achieved?
Yeah, of course. I think I tend to use an example that I didn't actually directly work on myself, but I think it's a wonderful example that the team at Mars I worked on developed. So Maltesers, I'm sure you're familiar with that brand.
Yeah, we get those out here.
Good. One of my personal favorites. So the marketing team came to the design team in Mars and said, we're being wiped the floor with at Easter by Cadbury and the Cadbury cream egg. It comes along at Easter and it dominates. We don't really have anything. So Mars is the biggest chocolate company on the planet. However, during the seasons, Easter and Christmas particularly, it isn't, which is odd. It's the time of year where, most chocolate companies thrive and they sell most of their stuff. Yet Mars's share of sales during those seasonal peaks is lower than the competition. And so certainly in the UK, where the Cadbury cream egg comes along for a few months every year, it absolutely dominates. So unsurprisingly, the marketing team came along and said, we need an egg that competes with the Cadbury cream egg. We want it to be on the Maltesers brand. Can you design us a Maltesers egg that competes with that? Most teams would have probably gone, yes, we can design you a really awesome Maltesers egg, and go away and design an egg. That egg would be to the point before, probably differentiated from a Cadbury's cream egg. Is it likely to be as distinctive or as iconic as a Cadbury cream egg? Very hard challenge to try and make something like that. However, if you come along and go, well, what's the real challenge you're asking for? You're not asking for an egg. What you're saying is, how do we compete with the Cadbury cream egg at Easter? And therefore, what is the Cadbury cream egg doing for people at Easter? So in that circumstance, you then discover this terminology called self-treating, or maybe it's terminology we invented during this project. But self-treating terminology is a great thing.
I think Einstein coined that, didn't they?
Well, maybe, I hope not. We do this a lot. We like to name things for our projects that we do and claim them as our new space. But fundamentally, this idea of self-treating is critical. It's a time of year where you can treat yourself to a small gift. It's permissible to spend a little bit more money than I normally would on something, for me, that's a little bit special because it's Easter, and that's an excuse to go buy something like a Cadbury cream egg. So in that circumstance, you then question, okay, what would the Maltesers brand do distinctively to deliver a self-treat? And that is where the Malteser bunny comes from. The Malteser brand is going to create a shaped chocolate bar in the shape of a bunny with a malt cream in the middle. That is how we do it. And so briefly, in in its first couple of years, the Malteser bunny outsold the Cadbury cream egg. That would never have happened had you just designed another egg. And of course, on the back of that, then the Malteser reindeer was brought to life for Christmas. And
the ecosystem of Maltesers.
The ecosystem of shaped chocolate comes to life. But those two things sell hugely well and sell at a high scale that competes with something of the size of a Cadbury cream egg. So for me, that's a really good example of saying, what is the real problem we're trying to solve here? And how do we deliver true growth and scale to a business that is attractive to a company like Mars or a company like PepsiCo?
And you mentioned your team. That was the other kind of thing I was interested in. Before we leap back into the conception, we can talk about creative education. What does your team look like? What's the scale? What are the kind of jobs that get done on that team? Is it do people share roles? Is it everyone in at every phase, or you've got specialist skills? What does that look like?
Try to keep people in as much as possible. So I mentioned cross-functional team. So the team consists of not just design innovators or design strategists like myself, but also R&D, insights, marketing, ideally also sales and finance. So all of the kind of the cogs of the system you need to make a new thing, but also the divergence of thinking that those different backgrounds have and the different knowledge centers those people have to come together. And so for me, it's critical that what we talked about, those ethnographies aren't just studied by my team and certainly not outsourced. So not given to an agency and an agency comes back with a PowerPoint presentation and says, this is what we've seen, this is what we've learned. I want my team to know the challenge. I want us to have empathy for that challenge and the people that live in that challenge. We do what we call lived experiences. We put ourselves in the shoes of those consumers and try to live those lives. So a simple example of that is when we're trying to work for people on lower income, we set ourselves daily budgets for a week and had to live with that income for a week to truly try and understand what that would mean for the lunches that I would buy when I'm out and about and whatever that may be. Or what I've just been doing, we've been doing a big project around health and well-being, and we're looking at the future consumers of what health and well-being may be doing. So I spent a month visiting a cryo chamber 3 days a week to really try to understand what that world is like. And those are extreme kind of things to do, but it's important to put yourselves in those shoes to truly understand how it feels to be in that space. So when we're presenting these opportunities back to our senior leadership teams, we truly understand that challenge. We feel that challenge and we can represent it when we're developing prototypes.
So how was the cryo chamber?
Freezing. Absolutely freezing.
How does it feel? Cold.
How does it feel? Honestly, it's. I don't know if you know much about cryo freezing, but I genuinely, I knew they said that it's minus, I think minus 70 degrees. It's cold, but I genuinely thought it was going to be just kind of your feet in boots or something like that, like a footballer would go into a cryo boot to help the bones heal or something. I hadn't realized that you actually walk into a whole chamber.
Yeah, you are the cryo boot.
But not, I mean, to paint a picture, you take all your clothes off, apart from your pants or your undies, as we were saying before, David. And you get given gloves so your extremities don't freeze, and you get some Ugg boots. And that is it. That's all you're wearing is gloves and Ugg boots. And you're standing in minus 70 degrees for a few minutes. Needless to say, it is freezing cold beyond belief. But what is interesting is that over time, your body gets used to it. So the first time you do it, it's insane. And you're questioning your life choices whilst you're in there. And me being quite competitive, desperately trying to get to the 3 minutes that I was set to be in there for. But by the time you've been doing it 2, 3, 4 weeks, you get to the place where you become more comfortable, you become more acclimatized to that scenario. And so again, you can start to put your head in the place of people that do this on a daily basis, years and years, or go ice swimming or whatever it may be. you can start to understand them and what that might mean for us.
Well, speaking of putting yourself into other people's shoes, in the alternate reality universe, what would Richard Walzer do if you weren't doing what you do now? Is there an alternate pathway that could have been your calling? Or
I
like a
think
dream? Like was there like a job that you like always dreamed of doing a certain thing?
the lame answer is I've always dreamed of being a designer from a young age. And then we talked about kindergarten education, whether this thing's been scoped for me or whether it was my calling or not. I think it's been set out from a very early age. My reception class teacher, which I think is kindergarten in Australia, is said to my parents, "Your son is really, really good at art. You should really help him, like go down that path." From the age of 5.
Wow.
So from the age of 5, my parents were told by a teacher, Mrs. Brownsall, if she's listening, that I was going to be a brilliant artist or designer because that's what she saw in me at the age of 5 years old. So whether I was good or not, I think that's just the path that I've gone down, and I've always believed that's something that I really wanted to do. Now, if we're kind of talking about what my dream was when I was at school, I really, really wanted to design cars. My dream was designing sports cars, working for Ferrari or McLaren or someone like that. But going back to what I said before, the reality is, as I learned more about myself as a designer, I'm not a brilliant aesthetical designer. And actually, if you're a car designer, you're a stylist. You are at the pinnacle of aesthetic design. So that was never going to be the job for me. So I think later in life, is the realization that I'm a design strategist or a design innovator. For me, it's a question of how can I really innovate and make things that are going to make a difference to the world. Now, I really enjoy doing what I do. So if my bosses are listening, I'm not looking for a new job. It's great to design.
Offers on a postcard.
It's genuinely, as you said before, it's wonderful to work on these fantastic big brands. It's wonderful to see the fruits of your labor almost everywhere you go. So I can go to different parts of the planet and see things that I've worked on, which is wonderfully reassuring and exciting for me to see it everywhere. So when, we worked on, early on in my career, I designed furniture for a brief amount of time. And I once saw my friend's parents bought a dining table I designed. That was an amazing go. Oh, wow. They love my design so much. They didn't know I designed it. And there it is sitting in their lounge. But it's a rare thing. I think that's the only person I ever saw buy it. And otherwise I went to the shops and saw it sitting there in the stores. Whereas what I work on now, I see people walking down the street consuming what I make. I've been to the Great Wall of China and I've seen them selling something I designed sitting in the little store there. So I can go to the extremities of the planet and see things that I have worked on, which is extremely rewarding. And I love to think that we're bringing smiles to all those people, bringing joy to all those people through the things they're buying, the things that we're designing, because they enjoy it and it brings that joy. I said before about impacting society. Do I feel like I could probably have a greater impact on society? Yes. I mean, it is designing snacks. Genuinely having a major impact on society and changing the world? Probably not. So we could say, yes, I would dream about designing or innovating things that would genuinely have a bigger impact on society and change our world.
Well, the UN could be listening. You never know.
You never know.
We'll forward it on. Well, how are we going? Are we getting towards our last question and making Richard tap dance about death, Alicia?
Yeah, we're getting there. So I don't know if you're ready. Are you ready for it?
I'm certainly not ready for death, if that's the offer that you're currently making.
No, there's no secret button on this thing that self-destructs your computer at the end.
Maybe that was a whistling noise before.
That's right. Don't tell anyone. So yes, we ask every guest on the podcast the same question at the end. And we've given you a few handles, people like to think about it differently. It might be about the idea of what's left behind. It might be about, that could be about the body of work, the creative work that they left behind. It could be relationships. It could be, as we've had with the director of the Melbourne Fashion Festival, the most elaborate Elizabethan wake set up in history, including ruffs and velvet. It's very Van Eyck.
Wow.
It's entirely up to you, Richard. But if you could design your death, what would you do?
Yeah, I've thought about this question after you sent it to me, and it's a bit of a lame answer, but what I'd love for is my funeral to be after a long and fulfilling life. And when I think about those funerals that I've been to in those circumstances, they're not the ones where the room is full of people. They are quite small affairs. They tend to be just close family. Sadly, the friends are no longer there. There's certainly no colleagues there because you've been long retired. And I think that's the funeral that I think I'd want to be part of, one that not everyone's crying at because you died too young and this person was integral to our lives. But no, this person has had their time and they lived a fulfilling life. So that's what I'd like to happen. It's not the most exciting or thrilling thing. But when I look at the rooms that I go to, sadly at funerals, I think about it and go, this person's had the most amazing life. But at the end of it, it's a bit sad to think, you look around the room, there are only a few people there versus the other ones I've been to where, sadly someone has passed away too young and the room is overflowing. There's people out the door and everyone is extremely emotional and distressed. I don't want that because that means that I'm going before my time, hopefully. So I would prefer the quiet exit, shall we say. However, you did talk about,
that was a great however. Go.
However, as you said, as I said before, I want to have an impact on society. I would love to leave a legacy behind. So I really like the saying that you die twice. Once when you take your final breath, and the second time or the last time when the last person mentions your name. Now, I don't expect anyone to be mentioning my name in 10, 15, 20 years' time. Again, all the names that we've mentioned on this call, the Einsteins, the Jobses, the Attenboroughs of the world, they will be talked about for a long time to come. No one's going to be talking about Walzer for a long time to come. But I would like to think that the legacy of some of the things that I've worked on are around for a long time and get talked about and loved, even if it's just an era of branding and people reflect on the brand designs that I've done for Snickers or Milky Way or any of those and goes, that was a great era of that design language on that brand. Or, oh, does anyone remember this product that we used to have when we were children? That was awesome. I wish they'd bring it back. That is the kind of legacy that I think I have the potential to leave behind, given what I work on, and maybe that will keep my spirit alive long after I'm here.
Amazing, yeah. You'll have one of those change.org petitions to bring back the Maltese bunny.
Luckily, it's still around. No need for that because that is again the true sign of successful.
This is just one of the platforms
innovation.
that you build.
It's one of the platforms that you build, but. Yeah, maybe some of my other stuff that's not been as lucky as the Maltese bunny. Yes, I'm secretly creating government petitions for this stuff to come back.
Yeah, RW001 dining table to be taken on by Vitra. Okay, well, thank you, Richard. I reckon we should give you, because you've come up with. Normally, Alicia and I sit down after these episodes and go, what was the moment? What was the kind of the grab that we end up calling this episode after? And you have just delivered from start to finish. So how about I give you a little list and you can give us your preferred title for this episode. I'll go in reverse order. Richard and the Cryo Chamber. What was it? The something of shaped. Oh yes, the yes, the ecosystem of shaped chocolate with Richard Walzer. Or
I like that one.
Richard Walzer and the unknown gnome.
Yeah, no. Definitely not Richard Walzer. Definitely not rich, but definitely not rituals in the cryo chamber. I think that's one of those
Could be
interesting,
misleading.
Minus
One of the-
70 in
yeah.
your pants. That could be another one.
one of those interesting periods of your life where you go, I genuinely do put my money where my mouth is and do what I what my team's to do by going, okay, I say we do lived experience, I say we do empathy. I genuinely mean that. But no, let's not call it that. Richard and the known gnomes. Yes, that's probably a good Richardism in that I've said something but not said it quite as correctly as I should have done. So yes.
We don't want you to be conflated with a gnome, though. That's my only concern about that one. Like you're the leader of the unknown gnomes, which could be an amazing punk band, I should say.
I mean, given my height, I might get my lawyers onto you.
Well, thankfully you're sitting, not standing, so we've got no reference point. Sitting, not standing with Richard Walzer. All right, we'll avoid the ecosystem of shaped chocolate because that could be found in the wrong kind of search. And unknown gnomes, and Richard. We'll call it that.
Good.
Thank you, mate. Really appreciate your time.
You've been listening to Creative or Dead. This episode was recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we would like to pay respects to elders past and present, extending that acknowledgement to all First Nations and Indigenous peoples around the world.
If you've enjoyed listening to this episode, you can find many more like it on whatever platform you get your podcasts. And if you've really enjoyed it, please feel free to leave us a review or to share it with someone that you think might find it interesting.